In today's episode, I sit down with Dr. Arrayon Farlough-Rollins, a dear friend of mine, and we have a very candid conversation about racism, Juneteenth, and how it all comes together as suicide prevention. She shares her story with mental health and a Black professional that helped her out, and then we just talked about so much more. In fact, we talked long enough that this is part one of two parts. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Sit back and relax. Welcome to the Suicide Prevention Lady podcast, where we make intervention easy. I'm your host, Dr. Rikki Turner, and I am a suicide intervention expert. Please take note, I am the thinky kind of doctor and not a medical professional, so please do not take anything you hear in this episode as medical advice. All right, we are here today with Dr. Arrayon Farlough-Rollins.
Hey.
The biggest deal. We know each other we met working in higher education. She's been in higher ed administration for 20 years-ish. And
started when I was 12.
Exactly. What everybody is thinking. They're like, what? So she was there for 20-ish years and then transitioned over to corporate training. But she is my sister from another mister in my close circle of friends, and called her for a favor to jump on the podcast. And she was like, yeah, sure, I'm down. So that's how we got here today. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm not going to tell the audience how such short notice it was, but it was short notice.
Keep that a secret then.
Yeah. It's important that we do.
We'll pretend like it was a long time.
It was, yeah, this was totally well planned and thought out.
Yes.
Okay, so number one, so glad that you decided to do this, and want to give like a brief introduction to the podcast audience, just to get to know you just a little bit. So can you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a mom of 4, a grandma of 3, and that like really pains my spirit that I am old enough to be somebody's grandma. Like you said, I've been working in higher ed for over 20 years, happily married 80% of the time. And
No offensive on.
And I come from a super huge family, 9 brothers and sisters, and lots of aunts and uncles, family full of love, and just try to bring that over into my work, I guess, and make sure that everybody else feels loved and included and all that good jazz.
That's wonderful. And you do such a great job of doing it.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate you.
All right. So, and we were just talking about this before we recorded, but we actually recorded a PSA about suicide when we were working at the same university, and I had forgotten all about it until she brought it up. So if you don't mind, can you kind of give your, I don't want to say testimony necessarily, but share your story with suicide and how it's affected your lived experience?
So right out of high school, I got accepted into my top choice school, and my major was, exactly what I want to be. Like, I've been telling people I was going to be an architect from the time I was in kindergarten until now. And I finally get into like this top architecture school in the Midwest, moved away from home, super excited. I got these academic scholarships, and I got a track scholarship. I was a high jumper. And I also got a marching band scholarship. So in the very first semester of school, I had like roommate nightmares, like the stuff stories and books are made of. Like, she was a nudist, like for real.
I was really hoping you were going to tell the story, because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's funny.
Yeah, she is like for religious reasons. Like, she said Adam and Eve didn't have any clothes. That's how God intended for her to be. And subsequently, she wore 0 clothes in our res hall. And it was for religious reasons, so they had to make an exception for that. Unfortunately for me, I had to see this naked lady all the time. So this roommate horror story, and I'm trying to go to class. And then in the middle of marching band season, One, I hurt myself. So I stepped in a divot and winded up having to have surgery on my Achilles, which means high jumping is now out.
Mm-hmm.
And I lose my athletic scholarship. And then went home for Thanksgiving. And while I was at home over Thanksgiving, you know how like you wake up in the morning and you're just laying in bed and you're like, what am I going to wear? Whatever. What do I have to do today? Well, I was doing that. And then when it was time for me to actually get out of the bed, I couldn't. And I could talk, but I could not move my body. And I called my mom and I was like, I can't move. And she was like, what you mean you can't move? I was like for real, like I'm trying. My mind is telling my body to do it, but it won't go. And I wound up going to the hospital. Turns out I had a cancer that caused a temporary paralysis. They never figured out exactly what about the cancer caused the temporary paralysis. But I basically, I was a first generation college student, like full-time college student. My mom never graduated college. My dad went into the Air Force. So I didn't know how to navigate withdrawing and all of that stuff. So I wound up flunking out of my dream school that first semester and was sick for a while and couldn't go back. And my parents had to go and gather my belongings. And I just was at a, what do I do now? Mm-hmm. kind of place. I felt like, just 3 months prior, everything was going great. Now I'm sick. I can't go to the school I wanted. I can't do any of the sports I want to do. Now what am I going to do in my life? Mm-hmm. And I just went to a really dark place for a while, which is unusual for me because anybody who knows my mom knows that we are a moving forward family, and you do not get to wallow in your sadness. There's always a plan B. There's always a plan C. Yeah. Okay, now that didn't work out. Okay, now what's next? And for the first time in my life, I did not have a what's next. Mm-hmm. And I was able to kind of navigate that a little bit. Again, working with my mom and winded up going to a community college and kind of got my group of friends. Even from high school, I had a boyfriend at the time. Then this boyfriend cheated, and I pretty much ran away from my life at that point. And this is going to be, you have no idea. We've been friends a million years, and you probably don't know this, but when I left Kansas City and moved to St. Louis, I actually didn't move there to go to school. I moved there to join a convent, which is hilarious because I'm not even Catholic. So I went to tour the Daughters of Charity. It was like a full-on nunnery.
Oh my God.
I went to go tour them, and it just so happened that the convent was just outside of the campus of the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And I got there, got almost to the door and was like, well, let's try college again instead. And instead of going to the tour at the convent, I found the admissions office at the school.
Okay.
Went on the tour of the school and called my mom from the hotel room and was like, I changed my mind. I'm going to try to go back to school instead. She was like, thank goodness.
That's so funny.
She was like, I was trying to let you lead your own life, but
I had some concerns.
Not what I wanted for you. I'm glad you came to this realization on your own. And so did that, went to school, and then was progressing through my degree and couldn't be an architect anymore. So I said, well, let's try interior design. And then let's try interior design. Turns out I'm really bad at the difference between off-white and ecru and and beige and all the other forms of white. So that didn't work out. And I met with this counselor and they were like, well, what do you get at? And I was like, well, I'm good at math. And and he goes, well, I don't know, maybe a math teacher. So I went all the way through the curriculum of a math teacher. Student taught in an inner city St. Louis school, got hit on the very first day by a middle schooler.
Yes.
So that was the highlight of my teaching career there. Uh, thought I was young enough
Yeah.
to be a student, but quickly realized that wasn't going to work out. And as I was approaching graduation, here I am again at this, like, what am I going to do with myself? Because now I know that I do, I'm almost done with a degree that I hate.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of going through the motions, and there was and I'm gonna say her name because she deserves flowers. Her name is Dr. Bridget Jenkins, and she was the director for a long time at the Multicultural Relations Center there.
Okay.
And I was in the cafeteria one day, and I was just like sitting by myself and just contemplating. And the student center was like a giant circle. So when she comes down the escalator, she could see me sitting there by myself. And she would sit there. She would come down all the time, and people would be there. And she'd be like, "Hey, how's class? How's, on the way to her office." And she goes, "Aren't you getting ready to graduate?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh, great. Well, what are you going to do with yourself?" And I bawled, like in the middle of the student center. I just started bawling. And I was like, I don't know. And like I had, she talked to me. And at that point, I didn't realize this at the time, but I was experiencing suicidal thoughts. I had stopped eating for an extended period of time, and I had lost tons of weight. I had broken a lot of the communication with my family, just a lot of things. And that, now I recognize as signs of,
right. You were isolated.
Yeah, I very much so isolated. And she goes, "You come with me right now." Yes, ma'am. And we went back, and she delivered pretty much a line that changed my life. She was like, "What do you like?" And I was like, "I like being in, to be honest, I like being in school. I liked all the activities of college. And I had like run for homecoming queen my freshman year there, like as a true publicity stunt. Like no one knew me at all.
Yeah.
But I was like, if I run for homecoming queen, people will know me after that.
Yeah.
So, like,
that's a solid strategy.
It worked. Like people were like, "Hey, you're that girl that ran." I was like, "Yep." And I had not a snowball's chance of winning, but people, knew who I was after I finished. But yeah, I was like, I really like just being in school and student activities. And I was like, I wish I could major in student activities. And she was like, I was like, I just want to stay here forever, pretty much. And she goes, "Well, if you're going to stay here forever, then you should get paid for it."
Yeah.
And she put me on the path to student affairs. I didn't even realize that was a job. I didn't know that there was a degree for that. I didn't realize that your master's degree didn't have to match your bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Just all these things that a first generation student
doesn't know.
They had no idea. And she really helped me find a way. And I felt like when I left her office, I had purpose.
Mm.
And that really turned things around for me and started me down essentially a 20-year career in higher ed.
Yeah.
The next semester, I did in fact graduate with my bachelor's degree, and I switched my major again. Like at the very end, I wound up, instead of a bachelor's degree in education, I wound up with a bachelor's degree with a double major in communications in Spanish because I had the most credit hours in communications in Spanish.
Uh-huh.
She was like, just get out of here, get the degree and go on to what you really want to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's my story. That's how I wound up on this path. Shout out to Dr. Jenkins. She reached out to me when I finished my doc. She was like,
"Oh, she did."
Like I posted about her, and she responded. And she was like, "That is so sweet of you to say." I was like, "Ma'am, you changed my life. You have no idea." And I feel like you need to know that. Like people who work in higher ed, they change lives all the time. They touch people's lives all the time.
Right.
A lot of times,
you may never know.
You may never know. But I wanted her to know.
Yeah.
She did that for me.
That's really, really sweet. I'm glad you had that opportunity to tell her that.
Yeah.
Because as people who work in higher ed, it's to hear those stories, even if it's years down the road, it's so heart lifting. Like it just,
yeah.
it makes your whole week. It's not even just your day. It just like it really, it's stuff that you really hang on to. It's like, oh wow, I had a role in somebody's life like that.
Yeah.
So I noticed you said director of the Multicultural Center. And let's have, so some background for anybody listening with Arrayon and I. We are the type of friends who we can sit down and have a conversation and have a hard conversation and talk about hard things. And still, we may not agree. We mostly do agree, but we may not agree. But we can have some really difficult conversations, and then everything is fine. Like we can do it civilly with love and respect.
Yes.
So this is why when I wanted to do a talk on this topic, I immediately was like, I need to talk to Arrayon about this, because we can have a genuine, like I can be vulnerable with you and I can say, here's where I've messed up in the past. And you'd be like, yeah, you really did. And this is probably some damage that you caused. Look at you realizing that, you know, like, and it's okay. So that's the preface I'm going to give. I wanted, because your story starts with your I'm going to say your redemption arc, basically, like,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
where it started with somebody from the director of Multicultural Center, right?
Yes.
These positions are under attack. There is no other way to say it. They are under attack right now. That is very much a diversity, equity, and inclusion position.
Yes. An initiative. Yes.
People do not understand the importance. There's such misconception around the idea of DEI. And we're doing this interview in June. I hope it airs in June. I'm not sure what you're all finding out now. If not, it'll be the beginning of July. But I wanted to do it because, especially as a white woman in America, in the South, when Juneteenth was made a holiday, there were so many of us who were like, June, what?
Like what?
What in the heck is that? Like, why is this a national holiday? What even is it? Like, we're not taught about Juneteenth in history. We're not taught. We don't talk about it. And so, from like, I saw it everywhere. I was on vacation with some family at the time when it happened, and I was like, I knew what Juneteenth was, but I knew I was in the minority. And so, when they made it a national holiday, I was excited. Like, I was like, holy crap, they just made Juneteenth a national holiday. And my family was like, oh my God, why? And I was like, we're not okay, context clues. We're not all on the, okay, got it. And I was just like, why are you mad about that? Like, I can't make that make sense in my head. And I'm a big fan of meet people where they are. Like, you know, I don't want to I don't think shaming people into compliance is the way to go.
No.
Like, you got to meet them where they are, educate them, take little baby steps, you know. But it gave me time to reflect too, especially it was around the same time. It was shortly after, I think, like the George Floyd and all of those things, and the Black Lives Matter movement, and everybody saying, you know, there's Black Lives Matter, and people are like, well, actually, all lives matter.
All lives.
And I'm like, no one's saying that other lives don't matter. Could you not be a toad? And but it's like, you have to put it in terms that people understand. And so I always go to, like, if you're on a city block, if you're on your neighborhood block and there's a house on fire, does the fire department need to come and put out all the houses, or should they just focus on the one that's on fire?
Right.
And it's like, we're in a time right now that Black people are being murdered
in the streets
and
on social media,
like there's video evidence of this happening.
Yes,
it's on camera. Like, there's no disputing this, and they're still getting away with it. And it's like, you don't think that is a huge problem? Like, the message that is giving.
Yeah, the message that it sends. And it's so funny because, well, not funny. It is interesting. Wrong word. It is interesting that, you know, there are people who are so nonchalant, and it comes from a place of, I think, of desensitization. Mm-hmm. It comes from a place of lack of education. So, like you said earlier, you know, a lot of people weren't taught about Juneteenth, and I think, you know, that one, in some places that's intentional. History is written by the victor, and they can erase a lot of times the things that make them look bad.
Yeah.
And obviously this is, not a shining light for, white folks in the American South, that for a long period of time, folks were, they held other people, human beings, captive and justified that.
Right.
And they did so by religious means. They, power struggle, and by, what's the old adage? If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And with people where that is their agenda, then, they don't want to educate you on it. They want you to repeat that because that's the, the direction or the agenda that they are planning for. And in order to get people to buy into it, it is helpful for them to see, or not see how this ended the first time.
Right. Right.
And so, I'll be completely honest. I grew up I was a kid in California, and we didn't learn about Juneteenth in California. We did learn about Juneteenth in Arkansas, where you and I met. But now I live here in Texas, which was the central focus point of Juneteenth. So when I tell you, when June comes around, they're revving up already, like
yeah,
ready to go. The Juneteenth flags are up. Walmart has Juneteenth ice cream. I don't even know what that's supposed to taste like. Like, what are you? I'm a little afraid, guys. Like, what is happening here?
Here's our cannibalistic ice cream.
Like, what?
What flavor?
I'm sure
this is what freedom tastes like.
No, it's gonna taste like watermelons.
You can make that joke. I
can make that joke. But yes, we're like, yes, that's the dark humor there.
Yeah.
From me. But yeah, it's like depending on where you are, you learn the stories of that place, of that particular place. But if you're not there,
are you saying you learned about Juneteenth in school? Or did you learn it from like family?
I learned it from family.
Yeah, I was about to say, I know that we don't.
No, I mean,
curriculum.
And there's a lot of things that, when it comes, was the Black History Month, you get 28 days of Black History Month, and you get Martin Luther King, George Washington Carver, Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
And now Barack Obama. So, so if it's outside of these, quote unquote main characters of the movement.
Yeah.
And a lot of that education either has to come from, lived experience or, those who were there, surrounding it. So like my parents, they were alive during the civil rights movement. And my mom moved from Arkansas to California in the 1960s so that she could attend a community college. She didn't finish, but that is an anomaly. My parents went to segregated schools.
Right.
They used green books when we traveled across the U.S. Like when I was a kid, my mom would like pack us these sandwiches in a car. We would drive from California to Arkansas to go visit my grandparents. We would not stop. They would take turns driving. It was a trauma response. I didn't realize that as a kid. But, as an adult looking back on those experiences, they made it seem like, sound like it was fun. Oh, we're going to stay up all night. We're not gonna stop. We're just gonna, if you want something to eat, there's coolers in the back, and we packed you sandwiches already, and that way we don't have to, try to get a hotel or motel or whatever. But I realize now, as an adult, that was a trauma response for them. They couldn't stop at some point.
Yeah.
And my father was in the Air Force, in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. He had stories to tell about, while he was in his uniforms, having to move to the back of the bus when he was traveling from Louisiana to Florida, having to eat at the back of a gas station, while he was quote unquote fighting for a country that he felt really did not love him back.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate that I don't want that history to be lost, that culture and that history. And so like trying to impart that with my children, or, teach them about that without souring them on
Right.
America, or souring them on, their experiences with different races and cultures. We can't give them the whole story yet.
Right.
But there are things that they see.
Right.
Like my 16-year-old was alive during George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, Barack Obama was the only president she knew. She was born the year he was elected.
That gives me chills, like that, just from that different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, when the first non-Black president in her eyes was elected.
Right.
Like, what is happening? So that goes
What's
to
this
show,
white man doing in the White House?
right, what is going on here? Like, and I was like, I hate to tell you this.
Right.
It hasn't always been this way, but that shows how, representation matters.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm going to bring it full circle back to, these DEI programs that are under attack. That was some of the first time in my life where, African-American doctors, doctor of education, when the schools that I attended, we didn't have very many men who were elementary school teachers.
Right.
And we didn't have very many women who were in higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
It was very cut and dry, even in our educational system. So being able to see someone like Dr. Jenkins, a Black woman running a multicultural relations center in a, medium-sized institution in the middle of St. Louis, that it was representation for me.
Yeah.
And, it resonated. And again, just preserving this history. I feel like, of course, Juneteenth is important, not just because it's another day off work, but if that's how you got to sell it to make other people happy, who's mad about another day off work?
Right.
Can we have some more holidays? Like, I'm surprised that Cinco de Mayo is not. Why is Cinco de Mayo not being more fully recognized? Or, things like that. Again, growing up in California, Cinco de Mayo was huge. We learned about Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
I didn't learn about Juneteenth in school, but I knew Cinco de Mayo.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that diversity, equity, inclusion, it's very important. I hate that these programs are being defunded. It is going to do so much more harm.
It will.
And
let's get into why, because I think that's the question that people don't understand. People are probably wondering what this has to do with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But it ties together. We will get there, I promise. But from a harm standpoint, can you talk about that a little bit?
It boils down to people thinking they can't. It makes the marginalized more marginalized. When you have someone encouraging you, when you can see people in the roles that, you want to be, or, roles that you've never even thought of, and now you realize you are capable of being that because someone else who looks like you, who sounds like you, who wears their hair like you, you've seen that person do it, so it's possible.
Right.
By eliminating, these programs, these initiatives, basically what you're doing is getting rid of an entire culture's cheering section.
Yeah. There's
no one to encourage them. There's no one to, they become, just lost in the shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
What is it when everyone is super, then no one is?
Right.
And that's really the feel. It's like we've spent in higher ed, especially, all this time trying to make sure that people feel seen,
mm-hmm.
Make sure that people feel like they belong, like they are included. We want to welcome everyone. We say that we want to welcome everyone, but then we get rid of the programs that do that welcome everyone. So it is very hypocritical. It's using our actions and our money to say that you don't matter as much as you thought you did.
Yes.
It's a slap in the face, really.
Yes.
And we know you thought you were special. We know you thought that you were welcome here, but as it turns out,
I don't think people understand how true that is, because the purpose of DEI initiatives, it seems like, and I know I've talked about this in the past on the podcast, but it bears repeating. They're equating it to affirmative action hires. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It includes programming. It includes resources for marginalized groups because they're coming in at a disadvantage. And you can say they're not all you want to because we have all these laws and everything. Here's the thing. They're not followed all the time.
No.
People
They're
are
hardly ever.
Hardly ever. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like when people are talking about the DEI hires, quote unquote, and getting all mad about it and everything. And I'm like, do you understand the letter of the law with affirmative action, which is what you're trying to say, is if Arrayon and Rikki are applying for the same job and they are equally qualified and the demographic makeup is predominantly white, then Arrayon would get the job. But they have to be equally qualified.
And here's what people don't understand. Historically, there have been instances where Arrayon may have been more qualified, but not gotten the job.
That's right. That's right.
And I'll say this, I'm not as familiar with, who all your audience is, but we have a saying, that Black women have to work twice as hard to get half as much.
Yes. And it's true. Like
it is.
I've witnessed it over and over again.
And we kill ourselves to show people that we're not just equally qualified. Sometimes we are excessively overqualified.
Right.
But we have to show that in order to even get our resume looked at, because someone who can't pronounce Arrayon is going to throw my resume in the trash.
Yep. I've seen it happen. Not here specifically, but I have seen it happen. And that's the importance to me of having this conversation and having, especially the people with the power, especially the white women who, we're going to talk about this in a second, why white women are scary to Black women sometimes. But when we're in the room hiring and we see the Black name, quote unquote, the Black name gets set to the side.
Name with it's a little bit of ethnicity.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, well, they're not going to be able to speak English well or whatever. And I'm like,
really? Did you just say that? And this
is my reaction. Absolutely the fuck not. Not in this room.
And here's the invoice in verse. You speak so well.
Yes. You speak so well. You're so well spoken.
You're so well spoken. And I've gotten that in a professional setting after I've earned my doctorate. How am I supposed to sound, ma'am? I
don't know at what point I've turned this corner in my life, but I'm here to make people uncomfortable in those scenarios. I want to meet people where they are, but I also want I want a memorable reaction. I need you
to think about what
that is a perfectly acceptable response. Exactly how am I supposed to sound?
Yes. What am I supposed to sound
like?
You
said that with your full chest. You must have meant something. How am I supposed to sound?
and then you get the crawfish, the back end. Well, I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah.
You're taking it the wrong way. It's back on me. You're taking it the wrong way. That's so aggressive.
I meant to give a compliment.
I feel like that is so aggressive, or she just gets angry all the time for no reason.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. I am sounding super judgmental right now, and I am recognizing that in myself. I have committed some of the worst microaggressions against Black people in the past. It would not surprise me. I don't remember saying that specific one to somebody, but one that haunts me, God, it haunts me. Oh, if I could have crawled under the desk and died when this happened, once I realized what I had done. But I was in grad school, so I was a hall director, and I had, there were two people in my office, and for purposes of this conversation, a white girl and a black girl, right? And me. And we're talking about something, and the black girl had been, she grew up in an adopted family, so they had they had different races and everything, but they grew up in a small Mississippi town. And she was telling a story about how they were in their van, and they were at Sonic, and people were staring because she was the black person in the van with a bunch of white people. And it was like,
are you okay?
What's going on over there? Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah. Is she behaving herself? Why is she mixing with the white people?
Wow.
And they made a joke, like they had ordered one of the, it's not a McFlurry, a Sonic Blast, and it was Oreo. And they had reached out the window, were like, see, black and white do go together. And it was just funny, like they made a funny about it. And I don't remember exactly how we got to this point, but I said to her, I was like, well, yeah, but you're not really black. And we were having the best conversation up until that point. We were all laughing and having a great time. And I mean, her face, she goes,
what you mean?
Okay, then. And then she left. Just
wow.
Walked, did not say bye, nothing. She just walked out. And then I look over, and the girl I was with, she's like, I mean, it looked like she could have also died just by secondhand embarrassment for myself. And so she was like, I was like, what happened? I mean, I was clueless. I had no idea what happened. And I was like,
Whoa.
What just happened? And she was like, well, you told her she wasn't black. And I was like,
oh, I did say that out of my mouth.
Hang on. But she wasn't here for this part. But this is what I said. Here was my follow-up. I meant that as a good thing.
Oh.
What, Rikki?
Oh,
what? Why would you say that? Like, what? In what world? But like, when you're brought up in this, I mean, I'll just say it was a racist environment. Like, I don't like to say that my family was racist, but they definitely were. And so when you grow up hearing slurs, and you grow up, you're basic. No one ever said you're better than black people. No one ever said that verbatim. Mm-hmm. But it was still said. Like, the tones were there, the undertones were there. And so it did not, I thought I was giving her a genuine compliment, and I hurt her. That hurt. And oh man, that was a rough one for me.
It's so interesting because, like, hearing you say that, it's, to me, as someone who has known you for a really long time, I'm like, oh my gosh, she totally said that. But at the same time, as someone who truly knows you, I know that, that made you feel terrible.
Oh,
but
I never
I feel like, and I'm going to tell your listeners a little secret. They claim that Black people cannot be racist because they are the marginalized population, but Black people absolutely can be, and they can absolutely teach it, and it's in the form of it's also kind of a superiority. Don't let them tell you what you can't do, because you can.
Yes.
And that's what it sounds like from the other side of the coin. And it kind of makes it so that Black folks sound superior, so don't let them get you down.
Mm.
And my family, for example, they believe that is very much a form of encouragement.
Yeah.
And so when they, for one of the, if I tell a story about, I have a, not an altercation, but, a little tiff with somebody at work, the first question they'll ask me, was she white? and if I say, yeah, they're like, figures.
Yeah.
I think figures they would treat you like that,
Here's the thing. I can forgive a person who is a white person who is brought up racist and is truly ignorant. They do not know the harm they're causing.
Right.
I can be really forgiving about that. Once you know better, you have to do better, though.
That part.
And to me, that's the issue. So like, if somebody says something arguably offensive or arguably racist or something like that, I'm not afraid to say, what did you mean by that?
What did you mean by that? Yeah. Ask the question.
And it's okay to say, what did you mean by that? That's not saying, hey, you racist fuck, like that's not going to reach anybody. But if just asking the question, what did you mean by that? It opens a door for them to evaluate what they just did.
Yes. And also it becomes, if necessary, a teachable moment.
Exactly. Like they can come to their own conclusion. Like they can self-reflect a lot of times and be like, what did I mean by that? Another thing, white people do this all the time. I will tell a story to somebody and be like, there's, there was this lady and there was this guy and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next story, I can be like, there was this lady and there was this black guy. And it's so funny because you're just conditioned to do it that way. And it took like conscious breaking of that for me to like, wait, what does their race have to do with the story? Is it central to the story?
And sometimes, I'm not offended by that because sometimes it is. And again, because of the history in the American South or, the history of cultures, then when you say someone's race in the story, you already know what the person receiving that story, what they have in their mind about that person.
Mm.
And so you are painting a picture based on someone's already preconceived notions and perceptions when you say the race of the person.
Right.
And even though I feel like we try to get away from that, it's still like if I started a story that said, I was shopping and this Karen, you know exactly who I'm talking about.
I know their haircut.
Yes. It is because that is what society has painted. So like, I feel really bad sometimes when I come across someone whose actual name is Karen.
Yeah.
Same. I'm like, I'm so sorry this is happening to you because
it's not great.
It's not. But you're not really saying, I didn't tell you that Karen was white. I didn't tell you Karen called the police on somebody. I just said there was this Karen, and you already have in your mind what personality I feel like I was getting ready to encounter in this story. And so, like I said, I'm not offended. Some people are. And so that's the other thing to think about too, that not every white person is the same, not every black person is the same.
Right. And that's there's a lot of seemingly universal rules, and it's like it's not. I think the key, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is remaining curious.
I agree.
And being humble enough that if you are called out, if somebody asks you, so what did you mean by that exactly? Or if they say, well, I'm not sure that their race had anything to do with the story, or any other myriad phrase, or hey, it's offensive. That is objectively offensive.
Yes. What you just said offend. And so I have to be careful too. When I say that, I have to say what you said offends me. Because again, we're not all the same. For example,
I just love the way Arrayon speaks so candidly and boldly and shares her opinions that might be different than other people's. I really enjoy her, and I hope you did too. Please take some notes of what you could do to be more proactively anti-racist. If there's a social media post, if you want to share this episode, there's all kinds of different things you can do. But making sure that us as the majority are not committing microaggressions and those things toward more marginalized communities. It's really important work, and it's our responsibility to do those things. Tune in next week where we continue the conversation with Dr. Arrayon Farlough-Rollins. We talk more. We start the conversation going in hard with the N-word and why it's okay or not okay to say it. It's a fascinating conversation all the way through. So I hope to see you next week where we continue to learn how to intervene with ease.